When we talk about access to justice, many people are really talking about access to law. And I think it's really important to go beyond access to law and to think about how access to law can contribute to real justice for Canadians.
Access to justice in any society is fundamentally important. The ability of a society to ensure that members of a society are able to settle their disputes and know that their disputes are settled in a fair way is fundamental. People won't always get the answer they agree with, but if they don't have a sense that they've had access to a system that is fair and that works, they won't have confidence in the result.
So I'm really happy that we've had this opportunity to talk about community clinics and access to justice during this Access to Justice Week. It's something that we don't get to do all that often, and I'm particularly happy that a number of people agreed to participate.
Access to justice is more than accessing a lawyer. It is understanding how the legal system functions. It's understanding our democracy. It's respect for rule of law, ensuring that rule of law is underpinned in our democracy. And so I think for a lot of vulnerable people within our country, we need to ensure that everyone feels that they have the right to justice.
The most important thing, I believe, when dealing with access to justice for individuals is the importance of those individuals knowing that they have legal rights.
That the work of community clinics in increasing both the access to justice of the individuals and increasing social justice for these communities has a tremendous effect for the entire society. In fact, it creates social inclusion because the people who are typically most marginalized in society, who are most likely to fall through the cracks, are given an opportunity to actually participate in the justice system and will have a belief that, yes, they can actually have their issues heard.
As it happens, it's almost 50 years since I was the first articling student at Parkdale Community Legal Services. And since then, I've been involved in boards of directors at Parkdale, at ACE, and at the Jane Finch Clinic. I was also heavily involved in the Grange Commission in 1978, which first brought community legal clinics into the Ontario Legal Aid Plan. And I spent several years working at Legal Aid as the clinic funding manager. So I am very excited to be able to talk about the importance and significance for the future of access to justice in relation to community legal clinics. One of the questions that people ask is why access to justice is important in Canada. Obviously, it is very much part of our tradition of democracy and the institution of the rule of law. Of course, community legal clinics are particularly concerned about the justice needs of marginalized individuals and disadvantaged communities. What is important to recognize in the history of community legal clinics is that they were the first to recognize that some clients would have different kinds of legal needs. Community legal clinics have always defined access and justice from the perspective of marginalized individuals and disadvantaged communities. For example, racialized communities, disabled individuals, people who are not citizens, and people who have low or no income. Community legal clinics focus on and have a specialized expertise in poverty law that responds to the needs of these marginalized individuals and disadvantaged communities. For example, social assistance, workers' compensation, social housing needs, the needs of refugees and immigrants, and racialized and Indigenous communities across the province. Community legal clinics promote access and justice for these individuals and communities. In 1997, the Legal Aid Review identified this particular focus, saying that the needs of community legal clinic clients involved different and multifaceted problems that include but much more than just low incomes. The focus, in fact, is services that change social and legal arrangements, that perpetuate exclusion based on poverty. Thus, community legal clinics do a large number of individual cases for individual clients. But they also focus on group systemic legal challenges, law reform initiatives, and outreach to community organizations that can help to serve community needs. All of them have always had finite annual clinic budgets, and there's never enough money for the purposes of serving all of the clients in need. The community legal clinics are very special because the allocation of their funding for services is done by local boards of directors in the communities. Community legal clinics with their boards of directors in individual communities can be nimble and effective in reallocating resources as needs are constantly changing. When I was an articling student at Parkdale Community Legal Services in the early 1970s, and people began coming with their problems to the clinic, it became evident very quickly that a lot of clients had, if not the same, very similar kinds of legal problems. This was particularly true then in relation to social assistance recipients and tenants in the Parkdale community. And it was interesting that it didn't take us very long to realize that serving one individual client after another, after another, after another, was not the most efficient and effective use of our very scarce and finite legal resources. So it was from that experience that clinics began the process of class action suits, of systemic legal action, of efforts to actually change the law through law reform proposals, and to engage with other community organizations in trying to be as efficient as possible with the use of those scarce resources. It's very much part of the tradition of community legal clinics, and it is one of the reasons why community legal clinics have been so effective in spite of their finite and never entirely sufficient resources. In this way, I think that community legal clinics not only provide access to justice, they also provide justice for the most marginalized and disadvantaged individuals and communities. I think this was best summed up many years ago by Attorney General Roy McMurtry. And I'm going to quote from his comment. He said, "The clinics are in a position to take law to those who need it most. It's almost trite to point out that a great many poor people have never been made aware of the rights they enjoy under our laws. The clinics, located in and run by local communities, can reach out to advise people of their rights. They take the law to the people. In doing all of this, the clinics help convince people in these communities that they too have a stake in this society. I think the concept of giving people who are marginalized and disadvantaged a stake in this society is what we're talking about when we talk about access to justice."